From the bleachers to the bar, this is the Home Runs and Handshakes podcast. Yes, indeed, disembodied voice that sounds suspiciously like me. This is episode 3 of the Home Runs and Handshakes podcast. I am James Neveau. Today I am joined by the resplendently dressed and always awesome Frank Champagne Supernova in the Sky. How are you doing today, Frank?
I am held together better than the Gallagher brothers.
Well, we will see how their tour goes. I know I've got a friend of mine who's risking financial ruin to go see them in Manchester, I believe. So good luck
that's
to
home
him.
For them.
I was going to say good luck to him.
Yeah.
We will see how that show goes. And while we're kind of casting out our wishes of, good fortune and good luck to people, got to give a special shout out to Billy Williams. It was his birthday today. The Cubs did a nice little tribute to him before the game. And Frank Nova, of course, being the vaunted baseball fan that he is celebrating by wearing a Billy Williams jersey. Frank, the floor is going to be yours. I'll give you about 45 seconds or so. Wax poetic about the great Billy Williams.
Well, Billy Williams was such an amazing hitter and such a great ball player. And he was one of those guys he was just so badass. He was the first real badass Cub growing up for me, like before Andre Dawson or anybody else. He would just hit, and like when the 69 Cubs fell apart, he still hit. He wound up playing in over 1,000 straight games and won a batting title. Probably should have won the most valuable player in 1972. It was in the days before advanced metrics. So if you look at 1974 WAR on Fangraphs or Baseball Reference or anything, Johnny Bench does rate higher because he was a catcher and Billy was a left fielder. I don't care. Billy was awesome. He should have won.
Mm-hmm.
And now I got something for you, which is in the 60s, Billy wanted to change his uniform number from 26 to another number. Do you know what number that was and why he wanted to change it?
Was it number 69? Because he's a child. That's my guess.
It was not. He is a beauty, but he's not a hockey player.
Okay. My legitimate guess will be number 42.
Very close. 44.
Okay.
He wanted to wear 44 because there were several all-stars, all from the Mobile, Alabama area. So Henry Aaron was from Mobile. Willie McCovey was from Mobile. And Billy Williams, of course, is from Whistler, Alabama. And he wanted to change his number to 44 so that way he could be part of this enclave of Alabama all-stars all wearing number 44. And the fact that 26 is on the flagpole lets you know how it went.
Yeah, well, obviously got to blaze his own trail. You look at all of his stats from his career, and everybody, of course, talks glowingly about the career of Ernie Banks with the Cubs, and rightfully so. But Billy, really, when you look back at his legacy with the team, just had such an incredible career. I think he's like top 5, top 10 in basically every single category in Cubs history. That is a guy who, without a doubt, on the Mount Rushmore of Cubs players. I know that these Mount Rushmore lists tend to kind of take everything into account, but I don't think there's any argument that Billy has to be on that particular monument if you were to erect one for the Cubs.
And if you were going to make a Mount Rushmore of prettiest swings in baseball history, he'd be on there also.
Absolutely, man. You think of like just there's a reason that, he's so beloved, and you look back at highlight videos of him just like, doing that little adjust of his batting helmet and then just unleashing this gorgeous free flowing swing. And, there just have not been a lot of guys who have been like that. I know a lot of guys kind of slash and attack the ball. There's just the dudes like Ken Griffey who've just kind of got that like beautiful looping swing that gets the bat in the zone at exactly the right, tempo and speed and everything. Billy's exactly in that category too.
Yeah.
All
And
right. Well, we ended up signing a little bit more to Billy Williams than we allotted ourselves. So, as penance, we will now talk about the week that was for the Chicago Cubs. I know it's a huge, egregious sin to talk about Billy Williams for a couple of minutes. I'm sure our listeners are just so angry right now and typing so many nasty things to us on Blue Sky. But in an attempt to win you guys back, we will now talk about the week that was for the Chicago Cubs. Frank, you and I talked about kind of our realistic expectations of what we wanted going into the week playing against the Phillies and then the Pirates. We said we wanted 5-2 because that would entail them winning the series in Philadelphia. Of course, they didn't do that, but they did win 3 out of 4 against the Pirates, and honestly, pretty pretty tough fashion for one-run games at Wrigley Field this weekend. But the Cubs did, kind of like they did against the Rockies, just managed to do enough to win. And once again, man, it's that pitching, Frank, that just keeps them in these games. Like their June statistics for pitching are just absolutely crazy. Like they've got a 2.43 ERA this month, 284 on base percentage against. I mean, they are doing a really good job of stifling lineups. And it's not like they've played, a lot of terrible teams. They had to stifle the lineups of the Tigers and the Phillies, for example. So just, again, really good starting pitching for them and just really good, grind out wins that they're really going to appreciate come August and September.
yeah, I'm not sure the best pitcher in town this week wasn't Wrigley Field.
That's very possible.
There were a lot of balls dying.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
they had that happen yesterday too. They had balls dying at the warning track. I think Seiya had one for sure. Dansby had one today that looked
Seiya
really
had
good.
one. Seiya had one today too, and it looked like it was right in that lane heading towards the video board, where the video board would block the wind enough to let it get out, and didn't happen.
Yeah, it's just crazy weekend. And again, like you're going to value these one-run wins. And at the end of the season, you always have, the media pundits who are going to look back at those things and say to themselves, well, look at the Cubs record in one-run games. And the fact that they were able to reel off 3 of them against the Pirates in this series, really, really impactful. Frank, I wanted to kind of ask you, who really stood out to you in this series? I think there's a couple different directions we can go, but I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts, especially about that Pittsburgh series that we just saw.
Cade Horton. Cade Horton was
Yep.
He was phenomenal. He knew he was pitching against Paul Skenes.
Mm-hmm.
He knew he basically had to shut the Pirates out for as long as he could go, and he did. And he was really, really good. The other guy that I liked a lot in this series was today, Colin Ray, because the first inning looked like it was just going to be we were getting the bad Colin Ray today.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to pull it together, and he got a quality start. He gave up the 2 runs in the first, but then he retired 15 in a row, I think.
At one point, yeah, I believe so.
And yesterday, Matthew Boyd retired 14 in a row at one point. So,
yeah.
I mean, part of it is the product of good pitching, part of it is the product of the Pirates lineup.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at kind of just some of the guys who honestly have been struggling for the Cubs the last few weeks in their lineup, your Matt Shaws and your Carson Kellys, and you kind of realize that the Cubs are sputtering a little bit offensively, and so they need these types of pitching performances to kind of pick them up right now. And just to get back to Cade Horton, like it was really funny. You look at the box score from the game, you're struck by how similar the results were for Paul Skenes and for Cade Horton, because I mean, Skenes went 5 innings. The Cubs made him throw 95 pitches in 5 innings. That's a big win to get him out of the game that early. Yeah. And then Cade Horton had his best game score of the season, according to ESPN. Like he pitched 5 2/3 innings. I think only gave up 3 hits and had 4 Ks and a walk. And just the fact that he knew that this was like the marquee game going on, you're on MLB Network going up against, Paul Skenes. It's really easy to try to overthrow the ball and to try to get too cute with things. And he just really stuck to his game plan. And I was very impressed by the way that he handled his business on Friday.
Yeah. This week, well, we'll get to the upcoming week later, but, there's becoming this wealth of pitchers in the National League Central, these guys who can pump it in at 100 miles an hour for 6 or 7 innings.
Mm-hmm.
And the Cubs don't have one of those. Horton is their best pitcher, and the movement he gets on the ball and his mix of pitches, he does, he throws 96, which, you know, it's not as sexy as a triple digit number, but it's still really damn good.
Yeah, and like you said, it's the movement and the fact that like he can throw that 96-mile-an-hour pitch and it can act like a cutter or a
Yeah.
sweeper even if it moves enough. Like it's insane to watch it. And it's like I would call it pitching ninja pornography, right? Where like he literally could pick probably 3 or 4 clips a game from what Cade Horton is able to do, and you're just going to sit there mouth agape watching it. And I know that Cade is still a very young pitcher. There's still going to be a lot of that give and take in terms of teams being able to adjust to him and kind of know how he's going to approach an attack. But it is so hard to lay off of a fastball that has that kind of movement on it potentially.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that the advanced metrics are not great on his fastball this season. He's had more success primarily with breaking stuff. I still think that's going to come for him. And I do think that that's going to end up being a really valuable asset for him once he kind of gets that really dialed in and is able to have the pinpoint control that we are expecting and assuming that he's going to be able to have.
Well, one of the things with advanced metrics in his pitching is it's going to take a little while because the people who do the advanced metrics, there is a human element to this. And they watch his games. And as they watch his games, they'll say, okay, cutter 96, this, sinker 92, whatever. And it's not Cade Horton, it's every pitcher. They chart their games and call the pitch based upon the game. And so that they might be sitting at their computers seeing that 96-mile-an-hour four-seamer with the 18-inch cut and putting it in as a cutter instead of a four-seamer. So the
Right.
metrics are going to be a little off until the people who do these game logs get more familiarity with his repertoire and understand, okay, that's his four-seamer and that's how it cuts. So
I'm sorry, Frank. I have to point this out. I heard this just now, and it was cogent baseball analysis from Home Runs and Handshakes. What the hell is going on right now? This isn't what I signed up for.
it's okay if that scares you too much. Just look at my nameplate down here, and everything gets back to normal.
For those of you who cannot read Frank's nameplate right now, he is not Frank Nova today. Instead, he is Justin Turner's Truck Nuts. And if you did not see, was it the Thursday night game against the Pirates?
Thursday night game against the Pirates.
Justin Turner was pictured standing at the bottom of the stairs of the dugouts. And if you've seen the quote unquote truck nuts that people put on like their Mustangs and stuff, he certainly had that, and it was featured very prominently on the broadcast. So this isn't something that, this isn't some dumb thing that we came up with. Yeah, Claire is literally going to show you this. Claire is literally going to be showing our poor viewers on YouTube this moment. Yep, there it is. Just shakety shake, shake, shake. Clark the Cub wishes.
And it was so funny because my wife and I watched the game, and my wife goes, "Did I just see it?" Yes, you did.
Well, you know what? It's, just another one of those things. And I mean, these guys have been, like crotch bumping on home run celebrations and stuff. It's not like this is, completely uncharted territory for the Chicago Cubs this season. There's been a lot of genital reminders that they are just a team full of, boys acting like men.
Well, all men are boys with jobs.
That's very true. That's another astute observation. So now we've got cogent baseball analysis, pretty skillful psychoanalysis, and junk talk. I feel like we've kind of hit for a trifecta here. And it's about this moment, I think, in the podcast, approximately 13 minutes into our third episode, that Claire Philby has realized she has made a gigantic mistake in her life and has no idea what to do about it for the rest of the time that we're doing this. So while Claire kind of puts herself back together here, I did want to hit you, Frank, with just a couple of really silly statistics that I saw in the pregame notes for the game today against the Pirates. Matthew Boyd, I'm sure you guys have all seen the video of that pickoff that he had in Saturday's game. Just an incredible move that he's been able to.
It was so good.
Oh, my God. So good. Phenomenally good. I don't know if you realize this, Frank. He's now picked off base runners in 3 straight games. That ties a Cubs record. Do you know the other 2 pitchers to pick off base runners in 3 consecutive games?
I would guess Kyle Hendricks.
It is not Kyle Hendricks. A little bit,
Wow.
it's earlier vintage than that. It's like honestly, kind of your formative years of Cubs fandom, I would imagine. The 70s and 80s would be the answer for this.
Oh, 70s. I seem to recall, I think Russell had a decent move.
He did, but it was not him.
Okay.
I'll give you one more guess.
Kenny Holtzman?
It was not Kenny Holtzman. It was none
I
other
figured,
than Bill
I figured
Hand in 1970
okay.
and the Red Baron himself, Rick Sutcliffe, in 1985.
Well,
Had
remember Sutcliffe had that weird thing where he would kind of bounce to third and then throw to first.
Yep.
Um, Bill Hands, he's one of those guys. Well, look, we could do like my little nostalgia corner every week, and at some point we could talk about Bill Hands in a little bit more depth.
Sure.
But he was really, really good. And as a side note, a very nice guy.
Well,
Um,
good.
but yeah, we could talk about Bill Hands later on.
And I also loved another statistic that the Cubs dropped just kind of casually, and like you realize how obscenely crazy this is. Drew Pomeranz, that by the way, the run that he gave up on Friday was an
Was
unearned
unearned.
run. So, and also I don't think it counts against you at all, does it? Like I think if it's the
It,
ghost runner, it's
it
like this weird statistical quirk, right?
well, it goes in as a run, but it's not an earned run.
So he has now gone 20 consecutive appearances without allowing an earned run. So it's technically obviously a scoreless appearance streak. So that is the longest in MLB. The second longest now belong co-owned by Ryan Presley and Caleb Thielbar, 16 consecutive scoreless appearances for each of them. I bet you never thought we'd say that sentence this season.
Well, they actually, maybe it was Thursday night's game or Friday's game. They were talking about Presley and the game that was just that huge disaster for him.
Mm-hmm.
And what he did after the game was he went to Ian Happ. And it's easy to make fun of Ian Happ for multiple reasons, but the fact of the matter is Ian Happ is an incredibly intelligent baseball player.
Yes.
And what Presley did was he went to Happ and said, you know, give me a report on like how you would give me a report on my pitching. Like how would you approach me? What do I do? What do I do right? What do I do wrong? And all that. So Ian Happ wrote him up a pretty detailed report, and Presley took the report, read it, and then went to work with Tommy Hotovy on making the adjustments based on the report. And I mean, he got lucky. Was it yesterday? He gave up 3 hits and no runs.
Yes. Yep.
There was that double play. The ball was hit to Bush. Bush threw the ball over to Swanson. And for that one play, Dansby Swanson turned into Daniel Palencia. That was the hardest throw I've ever seen Swanson make in my life.
I've never thought to myself that he could throw the ball faster than Matt Shaw, but he may have been able to do it in that particular
That was
moment.
a rocket.
Matt Shaw all week has been throwing balls, and I'm just like, oh my God, I did not realize he had that kind of mustard on the ball. Like, I swear he's throwing like 90 miles an hour over there.
And
It's crazy.
And one of the things that's funny is that was one of the question marks on him was, did he have the arm to play the left side of the infield? And asked and answered.
I do have to take this moment in the podcast to point out once again, if you thought that we were a couple of baseball geniuses, I will once again disabuse you of that notion, because I do have to bring up Ian Happ, since Frank, you brought him up when last week we were questioning like what the hell's wrong with him. He can't hit the ball with any sort of authority right now. What did he do the first 2 games of that Phillies? Oh yeah, he hit 3 home runs, and then he had a walk-off single in the Sunday game. Team leader in slugging and OPS this week. So apparently,
and that was the week after saying that Michael Bush wasn't hitting home runs.
That is right. So we are now 2 for 2. So if you need us to ensure a successful week at work, like say you have a big presentation coming up or whatever it is, just let us know. We will badmouth you and you will crush it inevitably, making us look really stupid and making yourself look like a genius. So our inbox is open for that service. Probably make a little bit of money off that, kind of like a Patreon thing where we're like, hey, by the way, if you want us to, help you further your career, we'll insult you repeatedly and it's going to work out beautifully for you. So
I actually like having a weekly feature where we roast one of our tens of listeners.
I also would really appreciate that. And if you want to get in on this, by all means, please reach out. We are very gentle, I promise, even in our good humor. All right, Frank. I do want.
I am not.
All right, fine. I'm the good-humored person. Frank is. You wouldn't say crotchety old man, right? Like you'd probably go with a more tender description of yourself, I'd imagine.
Smirking nobody is what they called me back in the Twitter days.
Yes.
But I would just say world-class smartass, probably.
So you had noted jerk Joe Yerdon, and then you had smirking nobody Frank Nova because his profile picture was a smirking Jonathan Taves, and I do believe it was a Twitter user that thought that was you and called you a smirking nobody. So pretty solid nickname.
Well, he called me a smirking nobody, and then sorry, here goes the PG-13. Lenny Dykstra saw it and called me a.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, who didn't he refer to in that way? Like, I'm just saying,
Hey,
Lenny Dykstra.
He was stacking cheddar, brah, living the dream.
Oh my God. Woo, boy.
He handles all my investments.
Oh man, we learn something new about Frank every week here on the Home Runs and Handshakes podcast. All right, Frank Nova, we have talked a lot about the week that was for the Chicago Cubs, but now I think we need to be a little bit more forward looking, but we're not going to get into the next series. Instead, what we're going to do, we're about a month and a half out from the MLB trade deadline, so it may feel premature to talk about potential trade moves, except for the fact that we had a seismic event happen in baseball on Sunday where the San Francisco Giants have acquired Rafael Devers from the Boston Red Sox. You may remember him because he signed a $300 million contract, 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And now will be headed to San Francisco. Didn't want to be in Boston anymore, was I would say bordering on a bit of a malcontent about the whole situation. But now the Giants have got just this incredibly awesome young slugger, and they have upgraded their lineup in a significant way. And if you want to talk about a potential arms race going on right now, that's a shot across the bow at the Los Angeles Dodgers, where the Giants are like, look, we are in this to win this. We're not going away.
Yeah. And, and that's going to have an effect too on the market that the Cubs are going into, because if the Cubs want to get help, and they do, it's going to cost it. I mean, granted, they're not going to chase after anybody like Rafael Devers, but
no,
they are going to need. They're going to need guys, and
I mean, I don't think any of them are going to carry the type of price tag that a guy like Devers would carry, where you had to give up Jordan Hicks, a couple of prospects. That's, I mean, it's not the biggest haul of all time, but it's definitely no joke either. The Red Sox got back something for a guy who very clearly did not want to be in Boston anymore.
Right, and San Francisco now has an impact bat for the next decade.
Yep, they sure do. And adding him to that lineup, that is a very potent group. And anybody who thought that this was just kind of going to be a temporary thing where they were kind of hanging with the Dodgers, they're only, I believe, a game back right now, you might as well toss that idea out the window, because that team is very serious about potentially winning that division and making some noise in the National League. So very big news today, but it definitely prefaces the conversation that we're going to have now, which is, I would assume I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it to you anyway. If there is one area that you think the Cubs are going to be focused on trying to upgrade during the season before the trade deadline, where do you think that's going to be?
Well, can we stipulate that they're going to go after pitching? Every contender goes after pitching.
Sure, but I think the idea of just adding bullpen guys, that obviously would be a really safe and obvious answer. But I think that if you want to go a little bit more granular and say starting pitching, then I think probably get into more of a conversation about it.
I think they're going to look at starting pitching, and it doesn't need to be a long-term solution, because They basically because right now, I mean, Shota Imanaga's gonna be back in what, week and a half ish.
He's getting there. Yeah, I think his next outing is probably going to end up being with AAA Iowa this week, I would imagine.
Yeah, so once Imanaga's back, you got Imanaga and Horton at the top of your rotation. You'd like to get another top of the rotation guy, but you don't need to go long term because you're thinking it has to be that, at the start of next season, Justin Steele's back in the rotation
Yeah, I
or
think that
shortly thereafter.
I was going to say, I think that there's obviously going to be a situation where it might not be like right at the start of the season, but I think it'll be very close. Like, I think that he'll be back like May, June, probably. I think he ended up out early enough to where that's going to happen. But
Yeah,
I,
and
I do
it's
think that that ends up influencing what you decide to do. I think you're absolutely right about that.
yeah, so they can look around at veteran starting pitchers who are still effective and are either on a 1-year deal or on the last year of a deal. And, you know, there's good teams out there who have that one guy.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, bullpen, the emergence of Palencia has lessened the need. I mean, look, if Boston's gonna offer Aroldis Chapman, you don't say no.
Right, precisely. Yep, and that's actually a guy that I definitely would have penciled in as a potential option. I think that him and Seth Halverson, I think, are probably two guys that I think you're really going to have to keep on your radar. And I highly doubt we're going to end up seeing a situation where the cityless athletics are like, okay, fine, we're going to finally give up on Mason Miller. I don't see that happening. So I think it's going to be that level of like a Chapman or a Halverson or like a Trevor Williams type move if you're going to be looking at something like that.
Yeah, and it's everybody for starting pitching. I mean, if they do want to go with a longer term option, Sandy Alcantara is out there.
Yeah, and I think that that's like going to obviously influence how much they end up spending to get him. And I think that you're looking at a situation where you're probably going to end up having prospects that you'd be willing to move just because like there's kind of these blocks on their development path toward the big leagues. You think of Kevin Alcantara and you think of Owen Casey, for example. And I know that both those guys, very highly touted prospects, so I think are going to be really solid big leaguers, but you have to ask yourself, what's their path, what's their trajectory to the big leagues? And so you don't want to give those guys up in a trade for a rental if you can absolutely help it. But like if you
Right.
can see an avenue toward like a longer term upgrade at a position or, a rotation spot, that's something you definitely would have to consider. And I think this is the time to do it because this contention window specifically just seems like it's open right this very second. And you might as well cash that chip in while you can, especially if you don't think they have a future with the organization.
Yeah, and the one other thing I'd like to see them do, and I'm sure their thinking is the same, because you've got Casey, you've got Alcantara, and they're both on the 40-man roster.
Yep.
But neither one of them has really emerged as a guy that you can say, okay, let's bring him in and start working him into the big league outfield.
Yeah.
Casey's still striking out at almost 40%.
That's a lot.
And that's triple A pitching. That's
Yeah.
before he gets up against the Paul Skeneses of the world.
Hmm.
You know, and Alcantara, he's a guy you can put in any outfield position. But again, he's just not. He should be at the point where he's one of the better hitters in AAA, and he's just not.
Yeah, they haven't quite gotten to the place that we want them to be. And it feels like the tools are there, like Owen Casey's power. You're very,
Oh yeah,
intrigued by it, of course, but it's simply a matter, like you said, like if he's only going to hit like 20 home runs, he cannot strike out as much as he is. He has to be like a 30 to 35 home run guy at minimum to justify striking out at that level.
yeah. And if he's striking out that level, maybe he can't. You don't know if he can handle the big league pitching or not. Unfortunately, they're either going to have to ride him out in Iowa this year and see what he's got in spring training next year,
Yep.
or if Owen Casey is the type of guy where if Sandy Alcantara is on the table, you know, You're talking Casey. You're
Yeah,
talking Alcantara.
that's the centerpiece of the deal, and
Yeah.
I don't think it's quite the level of like a Cam Smith, for example,
No.
like where you got Kyle Tucker for him, but it's still a pretty substantial addition that you can make if Casey ends up being the chip that's on the table. I feel like it's not that level, but like kind of that next level down, and you do have to treat him that way. He is still a top 100 prospect in baseball, and it's not super common that you can end up getting guys like that at the trade deadline.
Right. And the other guy, I actually kind of had in the back of my mind. I know they brought up Ballesteros when Happ got hurt,
Yeah.
but the fact that they brought him up when Happ got hurt against the Marlins made me kind of wonder if they were kind of saying, "Hey, what do you think of this kid?"
Yeah. Well, and I think it's all about your long term vision for him too. And I know we mentioned that with Alcantara and with Owen Casey, but Ballesteros, if you think he's going to end up being a catcher, I think you have to look at that very seriously because yeah, you've still got Miguel Amaya in the mix, but I highly doubt you're looking at a guy like Carson Kelly as kind of like this long term option there. So
No.
if you see him as a catcher, you definitely are going to be like, all right, we can't just trade him for nothing. Like this has to be like a seismic trade to include him. But if you don't think that he's going to profile as a catcher, then that definitely changes the calculus a lot because, I mean, he's a great hitter, but if he can play behind the plate, that is something incredibly rare in baseball that you can have that kind of like homegrown talent develop in that position. So I think they're going to have to tread very carefully with him for sure.
Well, I think if they saw him as a catcher, he'd be behind the plate in Iowa.
That's probably a good point. I think that that's ultimately just kind of where their kind of focus is right now, and we'll see as time goes on, and just whether or not he kind of floats up in these trade rumors. I did want to flag two other guys. You keep mentioning the idea of kind of the rental guy, and I think that a team everybody is going to be circling for the trade deadline this season is going to be the Arizona Diamondbacks because they have two pitchers who are going to be free agents at the end of the season. They've got Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly. And I think either one of them is a really solid upgrade for the Cubs. I know that Kelly pitching significantly better than Gallen is this season, but I definitely think either of those guys is a tremendous insertion of talent into this rotation. And when you go short rotation in the playoffs, that could be really, really critical.
Yeah, I agree. And going back to Casey and Alcantara, the guy whose name it keeps popping into my head only because he filled this role so well for the Cubs the last 2 years is Mike Tauchman.
Yes.
I'm not saying they need to go out and get Mike Tauchman, but they need to get a Mike Tauchman type.
Yeah. I think that's a completely legitimate idea, and it's not one that's going to cost a ton in capital. You just have to go out and identify the guy.
No, you can get Mike Tauchman for, a gently used Will Sanders or something like that.
Well, and I promise you the White Sox are not going to be holding out for a king's ransom for a Mike Tauchman. That's just not going to happen.
No. But he's the type of guy who can play all three outfield positions because Counsell doesn't really have a choice. He's got to run those guys out day after day after day after day. And we're getting into the point in the season where they're going to need some days off.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to have
especially a guy like PCA, like that you've got to make sure that he's getting enough rest because he plays the game at 1,000 miles an hour all the time. And especially when you're going through a stretch right now where you have so few off days, you absolutely have got to get him rest whenever you can. So they're definitely going to have to be looking for probably a guy that can play a little bit of center field, I would imagine, just to make sure you've got that PCA insurance policy. Because you really don't have another guy like that you just implicitly trust to plug in there right now on the major league roster.
Right. So that's why that's the name that keeps coming in my brain.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, pitching is the big thing, and then, like I said, a three position outfielder who doesn't, he doesn't have to be a great hitter, but like one of the things, going back to Tauchman, I sound like Mike Tauchman's agent here, but going back to Tauchman, he was a guy who just gave such good at bats. Even if he wasn't getting hits, he was having these 7, 8, 9 pitch at bats. It felt like at least once a game.
Yep, absolutely.
Or even if he doesn't get a hit, he's putting that much more wear and tear on the other team's pitcher.
Absolutely, man. And I think that that is it's a big thing that the Cubs could potentially do where it would be a great upgrade at probably a modest cost. I think is something that
Mhm.
you could look at in a position like that. I think that the aggressive approach for starting pitching is going to be very important going down the stretch toward the trade deadline. So I think the Cubs are going to be competing with a lot of other teams. That might
Yeah.
be an area where you improve on the margins and it won't cost you quite as much. And I do think that that'll be something that Jed Hoyer and Carter Hawkins are definitely going to be taking a look at. Speaking of those two, interesting little note today that I saw from Jordan Campbell of the website Cubby's Crib, and it was about the contract of the aforementioned Shota Imanaga, who still working through rehab, had I believe it was a rehab start with the Arizona Complex Cubs yesterday.
Mhm.
Pitched 4 innings, definitely looking like he's probably going to end up going to join the Iowa Cubs for a rehab start. I think we're getting closer and closer to having him back in the rotation, but I sort of remembered this, but like the structure of his contract ended up being kind of strange when he signed the 4-year deal with the Cubs. So basically, it breaks down like this: the Cubs have a team option that would convert Shota's contract for the next 3 years after this year to a deal that would be worth $57 million. If they decline that option, it becomes a player option for Shota, and he could pick up a player option for $15 million for next season. If he doesn't do that, if he were to say no to that, he'd become a free agent, which I
Yep.
don't think the Cubs are necessarily super jazzed about that possibility. I think he could get, a decent payday if he hits the market. And so I just wanted to run this by you, just to bring this up, because I honestly had kind of forgotten the exact structure of the deal. But I also wanted to make sure that I'm not crazy in saying they're picking that up, right? Like there's no scenario in which the Cubs are like, nah, we're good. We're going to pass on that 3-year deal.
If they don't pick that up, I'm going to get on a plane, fly to Chicago, grab Jed Hoyer, fly him back to Florida, and throw him in a lake full of alligators.
So count Frank on Team Shota on this one. Yeah, it's a $19 million a season deal. You're doing that. Like
Yeah,
I don't see a scenario where the Cubs don't pick that up, even if it's like, but we signed Kyle Tucker in PCA. Everybody be like, doesn't matter. Get in the alligator filled lake.
absolutely. Well, PCA, the whole PCA extension thing is there's no urgency to that. Leave that alone. That you've got years to figure that out. In fact, it might not even be Jed Hoyer who does it.
Yeah.
So that I'm not worried about. Pick up the Shota. I mean, the structure of the contract, I remember when they did it, and I thought it was a pretty good contract because it was basically bust insurance for the
Yep.
Cubs.
Absolutely.
He's
He ain't a
not a
bust.
bust.
He ain't a bust, guys. I know that
So,
we're only a season and a quarter into this for him anyway, but I can confidently say he has not been a bust, and I think that
right.
that is a absolute no-brainer. But again, just wanted to throw this out there because I personally had forgotten the exact structure of that contract, and I wanted everybody to go along on the thought exercise because we're nothing here if not hoping that we can be thought-provoking. So.
Yeah.
You did mention PCA. Wanted to flag one other like kind of small item about him. Patrick Mooney of the Athletic wrote a very nice piece about him today, about how early he gets to the ballpark before games, 5 hours before games, to hit balls off a tee, to face breaking balls and fastballs in the cage. I mean, he, as I said, 1,000 miles an hour at all times on the field.
Mhm.
Very clearly, though, this is a guy who's taking his responsibilities very seriously to this team. And Greg Counsell has praised him for setting up this routine that he has. Big time praise in the article for John Maley and for Dustin Kelly. John Maley, obviously, you remember, worked with all of the, Cubs young stars like the Chris Bryants and the Javier Baez's of the world, and is now apparently doing some really good work with PCA. And I just thought it was a very interesting look at kind of the changes and approach that PCA has had this season.
Yeah, and one of the things I like to watch when I watch him hit is, and this would be a great article too, except you'd never get pitchers to comment on it, which is if you're a pitcher, how do you pitch to this guy? I have
Mm-hmm.
no idea because if you throw him strikes, he will mash it. If you throw a pitch a foot above the strike zone, he puts it in the seats. You
Yep.
put a pitch that's about to bounce on the plate and he puts it in the seats. Like, what do you like? I think about ball that he golfed into the seats because he had like 2 games in a row where he was just getting eaten alive on breaking balls down in the dirt. He
Yep.
kept swinging at him, swinging at him, swinging at him. And most hitters will then take the attitude of, okay, I need to learn to lay off this pitch. And instead, Pete Crow said, I need to learn how to hit this ball out of the park.
Yep. I need to learn how to punish the pitcher for daring to try to get me out the same way 3 games in a row, is essentially what he said.
Yeah.
I just think did I see a statistic? You may remember this, Frank, but I could have sworn I saw a statistic where he now has the home run on the lowest pitch and the highest pitch this season or something like that.
Yep.
Like that was just bananas when I saw that.
Yeah, and one of the things I like about the Mooney piece too is it kind of goes to, I was talking before about Ian Happ being a cerebral ball player.
Yeah.
And Pete Crow's one too. And one of the things about Pete Crow, and it's ironic because it also reminds me a lot of the player he was traded for, is his in-game situational awareness.
Yes.
He just sees things happening before they happen. And he's so good at being like 3 or 4 seconds ahead of everybody else on the field.
Well, that's why he goes out on the field before the winning run ever crosses the plate every time there's a walk. He forecasts the future, man, and that's all that Pete Crow does, Yeah. And by the way, we are deliberately going to continue calling him that for the rest of the season, and I guess that's going to be our second Rick Sutcliffe mention of the podcast, right?
I know.
That was his thing. So
that was his thing. Well, yeah. Although the difference being is, I think the Red Baron was being sincere in calling him Pete Crow.
You know what? You would expect nothing less out of the Red Baron than complete sincerity. So good for Rick Sutcliffe, he of the 3 games in a row with a pickoff, and good for us for picking that up and just making it our own, dag nabbit. Speaking of things that we're going to pick up and make our own, Frank, are we going to have some sort of a crusade about extra inning rules in baseball? Because watching that Friday game against the Pirates, I texted you how annoyed I was that this stupid ghost runner thing is still a thing. And Boog Shambi on the broadcast mentioned a really good article on Fangraphs about how home teams are at a distinct disadvantage with the new rules. And like they're scoring way less than they should be in those situations. And I floated the idea to you and Claire that I wanted to change the rule, and I wanted it to be you start the 10th inning clean, 11th inning you have a runner on first base, 12th inning and on you have the runner on second. And I want to know from you, first of all, is this something that raises your ire? And second, would you go along with me in the quest to make this happen?
I think that extra inning games should be decided with goalie fights.
Well, I had a feeling that was going to happen. I should have known. Requesting a sincere answer from Frank Nova would have been the rough equivalent of trying to get a hockey coach to say something interesting. So,
Phil, the whole idea of the Manfred Man is they don't want 18 inning games.
Why not? Yeah, I mean, I understand why. Obviously, you have limited roster size, and you don't want to blow through pitchers, and they don't want more scenarios where teams are like, "Oh, we're down 4 runs. We're going to go ahead and have a position player pitch because if we only tie the game, we're to be in big trouble," kind of deal. So I have a counter proposal for that, and I know Major League Baseball will not enjoy this very much because it would involve players making more money. But I think you expand the roster to 28 players then, and you will allow teams to have a 14th pitcher.
I mean, that would work for sure, but I'm sorry, I just don't have strong feelings about it one way or the other. It's just so now you have a runner on second in the 10th inning, and you need to devise a strategy for it. Like today, what the Cubs did is Justin Turner was supposed to go to second base, so of course they send out Vidal Brujan instead.
Yes.
And then Counsell sends up Kyle Tucker to pinch hit, knowing Tucker's going to get walked.
Absolutely going to be intentionally walked, yes.
So now you got runners on first and second.
It was Tucker pinch hit for McGuire. Tucker
Right.
then starts
Tucker
sucking
pinch hit for
Brujan still
McGuire,
third. It
and
was
then
John
Birdie.
Birdie. John Birdie.
Yeah,
Okay, there we
and
go.
Birdie almost won the game because they pulled the infield in.
Yep.
Well, actually, first thing that happened was everyone was expecting the Birdie bunt, and the Cubs and Counsell were smart enough to know that with the rotation play that the Pirates run, they were pretty much putting a big red bow on third base.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why they
So
immediately sent him. Like they
they
sent Brujan. They were like, he's making third base. This is
they
going to
sent
happen.
him to third. But the other thing that they did, and this was where I thought sending up Kyle Tucker to be intentionally walked was a great idea, was Tucker took second.
Yes.
Now, what this meant now with Birdie at the plate is if you're gonna if you're gonna send Brujan on contact and he's out, you still got Tucker on third, so you
Yes,
get
you do.
another crack at it.
Yep.
So
A couple of good managing decisions made by Counsell this weekend, by the way. I love the way he used Presley and Palencia on Saturday, too. I love that he had
yeah,
Palencia go after the meat of Pittsburgh's order and then had Presley go the ninth. I thought that was really smart.
yeah, yeah. They, Counsell, you know, Counsell is showing us why he is the Cubs manager and why his predecessor is still not managing anywhere. Although his name is bubbled up in a couple of spots. I'm like, do it.
I really wanted the Cincinnati Reds to hire him, and then they went and did something that was probably smart in hiring Terry Francona. So,
Yes.
oh well, that was a missed opportunity for some hilarity there. I do think David Ross will get another shot to manage a big league club if he wants to.
Well, he's also being floated if Atlanta decides that the Snicker era has come to an end.
You mean the
Ross
Snick
is,
era? Yeah, I get it.
yeah, the Snick era, exactly.
All
But yeah,
right,
his
so
name's being floated for that too.
not to deviate too far from the original point of the discussion, which was that I was getting pissy about Major League Baseball extra inning rules, and you do not think that it is an issue. I will continue to bang this drum by myself in the wilderness. That is totally fine with me. I have no
Okay.
problem with this at all. You just go ahead and be Mr. Johnny Status Quo, as you're very commonly known. You have never been known to rattle cages or to call for systemic change. So it's totally fine, man. Don't worry about it.
I actually think this is one of Rob Manfred's rare good ideas.
You know what? It's as long as he doesn't bring in the stupid golden batter. This is not the Savannah Bananas. You do not need to do something like that. I think that making the bases bigger was honestly a really good idea too. So I am also
up the game a lot.
Hugely in favor of that, and I'm going to be probably beaten to death for saying this because I'm a National League Baseball fan, but I also thought universal designated hitter was probably an overdue idea as well.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, we will not disparage the Savannah Bananas on this podcast.
Oh, no. Please do not misunderstand. Please do not misunderstand. I love the Savannah Bananas. I am going to see them in Chicago this year. I did go see them in Arizona earlier this year. Like, I am an unabashed supporter of the Savannah Bananas. I just don't want games decided by a point system in 2 hours or less. Like, that has its place in banana ball. I don't want to see that in Major League Baseball, and that does include the golden batter rule, which I think is comically stupid. And by the way, if you're going to do that, I have another proposal for extra innings, which would be that the home team decides whether they want to bat first or bat second.
Oh, that would be interesting. That's an interesting idea. That's one I'll go with you on.
I shamelessly stole that from college football, which I think does their overtime correctly in allowing whichever team wins the coin toss to determine whether they want to go first or second in overtime. But the hint, always go second. So I think you would see a lot of home teams batting first, honestly, if you did that.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, the reason that the home field advantage is supposed to be so good in baseball is because, you're batting second, you know what you're chasing.
You essentially know what you're chasing, yeah, but you also have an instance where the odds are suddenly a lot more specific on what they have to prevent you from doing. And it really opens up a lot of defensive strategies as well. And I think that was the thrust of that Fangraphs article, was basically like, you're kind of almost limited if you're the home team and what you're going to be doing defensively and pitching wise. But the visiting team knows exactly what they have to do and what they have to prevent you from doing.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is it's not a one size fits all situation.
Certainly not.
Depending on the day and
Where you're at in the
where
order, who you've
where
already
you're at in the
used
batting
pitching.
order, which pitchers have been used.
Yep.
Yeah, another thing they can always bring from the Savannah Bananas is just have like former players come out and have an at bat.
I thought you were going to say the swing off, which, I mean, that's, if you want to go that route, I guess hockey did that with the shootout, so why not?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to that Savannah Bananas game again. Just don't bring that idea to Major League Baseball. If you want to bring in, you can steal first base. Maybe we can have a little bit of a conversation about that. But anyway, we're not going to get off on a tangent about the Savannah Bananas. We still have Cubs baseball to talk about, and that will conclude today's episode with talking about the upcoming series for the Cubs. They face the Milwaukee Brewers after a day off. They got a 3-game set against the Brewers, who are currently in second place in the National League Central. Frank, 5.5 games behind the Cubs. The Cubs have not been playing their best baseball, and they've still opened up a 5.5 game lead in this division. That's nice, man.
Well, one of the things that's helped them out a lot is nobody wants to be in second place. Every time a team goes into second place, they immediately lose 6 games in a row.
Yep. I mean, the Cardinals have lost 7 of their last 10. The Brewers are kind of treading water a little bit right now. We said that about the Phillies too, and look what happened. So I'm not going to cast too many aspersions on the Brewers, but I do want to ask you, Frank, with these 6 games coming up against Seattle and against Milwaukee, what to you would be a satisfactory record for the Cubs, and what do you realistically think that they will hit in these next 6 games?
Well, they're both home series. I'd like to see 4-2. 5-1 would be better, but both Seattle and Milwaukee Seattle's pesky. They're a pesky team.
They really are.
And of course, Wednesday night is your appointment television.
Yeah.
This Wednesday night is Mizurowski's going.
That's right. Against Jamison Tyon ought to be a real fun one. And I will point out Cade Horton getting the start Thursday. Very excited to see him at the friendly confines. I've not gotten to see him pitch before. So that's going to be a raucous crowd on Thursday. The tickets for that game are kind of insane right now. So do want to flag Freddie Peralta having a very good month of June so far for the Brewers. Has given up a lot of fly balls recently from what I was looking at. And so if you get that wind blowing out on an 85-degree day at Wrigley Field, that might not be the best recipe for success for him. And so I'm wondering if maybe that's a little bit of a get right thing for the Cubs, where if they start putting a few balls up into the air, that they finally carry into the seats and into the bleachers. I think that the warmer temperatures this week ought to help them with that.
Yeah, I think so. And also there's been a bunch of guys who haven't been bad. They just haven't been like really together.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, this is a situation where you want them to, like you said, it be a good get right week for them, because after this they've got 4 in St. Louis.
That's right.
To start next week. I will not be here next Sunday, but I just want to bring up they've got those 4 in St. Louis is going to be, this is the part of the schedule where, they got to kind of make themselves into the cock of the walk.
They can say we are the top dog in this division, and here's why, kind of a situation. And having a 4-game set fresh off that Seattle series, I think, is going to be really impactful for the Cubs. And also, there is always a possibility that Shota Imanaga could come back during that St. Louis series too, which would be absolutely massive if they get him back. And if not, then they've got a series after that against the Houston Astros down in Houston. By the way, Cam Smith, first career walk-off hit the other day. So congratulations to Cam Smith on, continued success in Houston. I still think that was a really solid trade for both teams. I am not going to lose sleep if Cam Smith has a really strong career in Houston. I think that this was an aggressive move by the Cubs, and it was one I guarantee you they would make again for what Kyle Tucker's already been able to do for them.
Oh yeah. And Kyle gets his tribute video Friday night.
Yes, he does. That will be certainly, an emotional scene. I'm sure he will be overcome knowing him. He has always seemed to be a guy who wears his heart on his sleeve when he's out there on the diamond. He's not a a soulless automaton. Did the sarcasm come off a little heavy there? It felt like it was slightly heavy. All right. The real last thing of the podcast, though, it is Father's Day. And so I did want to take a moment to say happy Father's Day to all the dads and to the father figures out there. I have shared this publicly a lot of times, and both of my parents from basically the day I was born were like, yeah, you're going to be a Cubs fan. They just kind of nudged you into it. I'm not uncommon in that way from a lot of other Cub fans, but I always, whenever I think of the Cubs, I inevitably think of my dad, and he obviously is a massive Cubs fan. Hopefully listens to the podcast. This is a test, by the way, Dad. If you don't talk to me about this later, I'm going to have, some cross words for you. I'll tell you what. I wrote an article for NBC back in 2016 about what a World Series title would mean if the Cubs won one. I wrote this at like the beginning of the playoffs. Of course, it ended up turning out to be true. And I was struck while I was reading that story about basically the way that I portrayed how I would react if the Cubs won the World Series. And beat for beat, from popping champagne to going out to Dick's Sporting Goods to get a bunch of Cubs merchandise to calling my dad and my grandfather, it all happened. Like, it was so crazy how it just dovetailed perfectly with what happened. And I think that we all share feelings like that, I think, around this team. And especially in my case, like, I would not be as rabid a Cubs fan as I am if it weren't for him. And of course, I always thank him and my mom for all the support of that habit and of my, creative and work endeavors. And just wanted to wish my dad a happy Father's Day and thank you for putting me on this insane path. Really, really have appreciated it. And there have been moments where I haven't, but for the most part, it's been really good. So happy Father's Day to all you guys out there.
Yeah, and my father passed away in 2010, just a couple months before the Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup. But he took me to my first Cub game and my first Blackhawks game in 1967. And, he used to love to tell me stories about Hank Sauer and guys like that. And in 82, they had an old timers day at Wrigley Field. And it was the weekend that they retired Ernie Banks's number. And I really came out for the Banks number retirement, but I was like, yeah, the old timers game will be fun too.
Sure.
And I saw Hank Sauer was going to be there, and they had a tradition every time Hank Sauer hit a home run. When he'd go out to left field the next inning, people would throw out pouches of tobacco for him. And so when he came out for the first inning, I tossed him a pouch of tobacco, and I wrote a little note on it. You're my dad's favorite player, because my dad couldn't go to Chicago then with me, but I still wrote a note. You're my dad's favorite player, and so he picked up the pouch. He saw the note. He gave me a tip of the cap, and so I told my dad about it, and he got very excited about it. But my dad and I used to like to bask a lot, and just because we sat through a lot of bad Cubs baseball, and he became a Cub fan in 1947.
Oh,
So he got
perfect
a
timing.
lot of bad baseball. Um, but one of the games we used to play was we would sit there and name catchers, Cubs catchers, until we ran out of, till one or the other one of us would run out of names. And you remember the Big Mac, the Macmillan baseball encyclopedia?
I am not familiar with that now.
Okay, it used to come out every couple years. The baseball encyclopedia was published by Macmillan, and it was this huge book that had every single. It was basically baseball reference in book form.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And they had, they had a section that had team by team. So you could look at like the 1935 Cubs, for instance, and see Gabby Hartnett was your catcher. But then you could also see what other catchers they had. So I would go, that was my cheat. I would go through all these old Cubs teams. Like I'd go, oh, King Kelly, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Who doesn't remember him?
Yeah. There was actually a popular vaudeville song called Slide Kelly Slide about King Kelly.
Oh, geez, of course you would know that. That's honestly, though, like, for real, though, that is the kind of like little nugget that I love having you on the podcast for. And I've gotten multiple compliments about the little like insertions of Cubs minutia into the podcast that you provide. So I may provide, very little in terms of my contributions to this thing, but you certainly have already made a name for yourself for your little asides that you like to throw in there. So I appreciate that one, Frank.
Okay. Well, next week we'll talk about Lou the Mad Russian Novikov.
Unfortunately for you, you'll be talking about it to probably the wall because you will not be on the next episode.
Oh, you're right. You're right. I will actually be. I will be in St. Augustine. Could I say on assignment? I'll be on assignment.
I will literally say that you're on assignment.
Actually, I'll be in St. Augustine at a Ringo Starr concert.
I mean, that's a sign. You know what? Maybe he's a Cubs fan. You never know. I mean, the Pope ended up being a White Sox fan. Who knows where Ringo Starr's baseball allegiances lie?
I would love to find out that Ringo was a Cub fan.
That would be the greatest note of all time. So please, if you can, if you see him and you want to throw him a pouch of tobacco, maybe he'll throw it back to you with a note about his favorite baseball team.
There you go.
Well, we have solved all sorts of issues today on the Home Runs and Handshakes podcast. Frank, please enjoy St. Augustine. Safe travels next week. I will see, hopefully, some of you fine folks out at Wrigley Field on Thursday for Cubs and Brewers. And we will talk to you guys next week on the Home Runs and Handshakes podcast.